Welcome to the Blue Mouse Knits. Today I'm going to teach you how to design your own halter top. This is not a fully written out pattern with multiple sizes for you. I'm going to walk you through the steps on how to design one that will fit your own body measurements. And if you don't want to go through all of that work, I do have a version in my shop with 5 sizes. So if you don't feel like doing all the work yourself, you can go find that in these places. To begin, you'll need some yarn, a pair of needles that will go with that yarn, and you'll need to figure out a gauge with that yarn needle combination. So you can use any size needles and any yarn that you want, but I suggest you pick a combination that creates a gauge that isn't too loose to prevent the top from being see-through. So I have chosen I Love This Cotton, which is a worsted weight 100% cotton yarn. And this recommends on the back a US 8, but I've chosen a US 6 because I like the gauge that it gives you. It's not too rigid because the yarn is really soft and pliable, but it has enough structure that it's not going to pull apart and reveal anything while you're wearing it. So the gauge that I got is 16.5 stitches by 27.5 rows equals 4 inches, 10 centimeters, and that's in stockinette worked flat. So again, you can use whatever yarn, whatever needles, and whatever gauge that you want. So for this, I'm going to show you how to create a very simple summer halter top that is worked largely in stockinette and has I-cord ties. So I've created kind of a free worksheet for you if you want. You can find that for free linked below, or you can just follow along with what's on screen. So for the needles, you can use either circulars or straights, but I do recommend circulars that are at least 24 inches, 60 centimeters long, because you'll have quite a number of stitches to work with, and I just find it's easier. You will need either DPNs or circular needles for the I-cords though, so just keep that in mind. So first on our worksheet, we're going to start with our gauge. So like I said, my gauge is 16.5 stitches by 27.5 rows equals 4 inches. So you'll want to fill that in for yourself here. And then you want to divide that gauge by 4 to get how many per 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. So 16.5 divided by 4 is 4.125. And 27.5 divided by 4 is 6.875. So now we get into the sizing. So I'll put the schematic on screen for you. A is how wide your top's going to be. So you'll want to figure out how much coverage in the front of your chest that you want. So I'm going to make a miniature version for this video, so you don't want to follow what I'm doing because mine will only be a few inches wide. And then B, you want to measure across your upper chest, kind of, near where your collarbones are, because this will be the top of your halter. So you want to measure across that area and decide the width you want at the top and write that down for B. And then E is going to be the total length that you're going to knit. So you want to measure from near your collarbone down over your bust at its fullest point to your desired top length. D is how long the decrease portion of your halter, so where you start to decrease your stitches. What I suggest is to place a pen or a pencil at your underarm where you want to start shaping the top of your halter. So if it's helpful, you could put on a tank top and measure where the underarm of your tank top is. Place a pencil there so it sticks out and you can kind of see where that is. But you want to measure straight up, not diagonal, straight up from your underarm area to where you want your halter to end at your collarbones. Okay, so this might be 6 inches or 5, 7, 8, depending on how much coverage you want on the side of your bust. And finally, your C section of your halter is what you're going to knit plain. You just take your total top length minus the decrease portion minus a hem length. So for me, I'm going to work a 3/4 inch hem or 2 centimeter hem at the start of the body. So it's E minus D minus 0.75 or whatever your hem length is. So I know that was a lot, but just fill in the blanks here. So remember, I'm going to make a miniature version, so don't copy what I'm doing here. I think for me, I'm going to start out with 7 inches for A, and then B, which is the top, I'm going to end at 3 inches. I'm going to skip C for the moment while I'm filling this in because I want to work D and E to figure that out. For E, I'm going to work a total of 8 inches. And then of that 8 inches, I'm going to work half of that as my decrease portion. So I'm going to do 4 inches for D. And then I just figure out, okay, my hem is 0.75 inches. C equals E minus D and your hem. 8 inches minus 4 inches minus 0.75 is 3¼ inches is how long I'm going to work plain. So now that we know all of our inch or centimeter measurements, we're going to multiply it by our 1 inch gauge that we found earlier to give us our total amount of stitches. A and B, you multiply by your stitch gauge per 1 inch, and C, D, and E, you multiply by your row gauge per 1 inch. An important thing to note is that you need A and B to both either be even or odd. It doesn't matter. If you start with an odd number though, you want to end with an odd number. If you start with an even number, you want to end with an even number. It just makes it way easier when you're decreasing. 7 times 4.125 is 28.8. So I'm going to round that up to 29. And then 3 times 4.125 is 12.375. Since I need A and B to both either be even or odd, I'm going to round this up to 13 stitches. And then just keep moving down our worksheet here. C is ending up with 22.3 rows. So I'm going to round that to 22 rows. And for C, D, and E, you want an even number of rows total. So just round up to whatever the nearest even number is. Because we're working flat, it will just be far easier if you do that. And then D is 4 times 6.875, which is 27.5. Like I said, rounded up to 28. You don't really need to find what your E row count is. So now we are on to math part 1. You can kind of keep your measurements handy for this section. So we're going to cast on A number of stitches. So go back to page 2, and for A we had 29 stitches. So 29 stitches is our cast on amount. And then we're going to work plain for C rows, C amount of rows, which if we refer to page 2, for me was 22 rows. And then we're going to look at our decrease section. So A minus B equals the total number of stitches to decrease. So my A number of stitches was 29 minus my B number of stitches, which is 13, 16 stitches to decrease total. And that is my F. We need to take F divided by 2. B 16 divided by 2 equals 8. And that is your total decrease rows. And now we take our D number of rows minus 4. So D minus 4 equals 24 rows. And that is the total rows to decrease over. So now we move on to page 4. This is math part 2. So for step 1, this might sound confusing, but I'll walk you through it. G becomes the number of opportunities you have to equal H. So for example, my G equals 8 and my H equals 24. So I have to find 8 numbers that add up to 24. And it's easiest if the 8 numbers are all even, but they don't have to be. So I need to write out 8 numbers, and if I add them all together, they equal 24. This is a breeze in Excel. So if you have access to that, it's definitely easiest that way. Whatever G is, that's how many rows you have. And then you just put a bunch of numbers in them and add them at the bottom, and they need to equal H. So for me, I have 8 numbers. You'd think that, 24 divided by 8 is 3. Which you could do it that way, but remember I suggested that you want them to be even. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of play around with some numbers. Remember, you want them to be even. This is the number set that works for me. If I count each of the individual numbers, I have 8 numbers here. And if I add them all together, they would equal 24. That's what we're looking for. G is how many numbers you're using, and H is the sum of those numbers. You want to check if you add them up, do they equal H? How many numbers have you written down? Does that equal G? Once your math adds up correctly, you can apply this to your pattern. This is our example here, but I'll tell you what they each kind of mean. A 2 means you work a decrease row once out of 2 rows, so basically every right side row. A 4, for example, means to work a decrease row 1 out of every 4 rows. So you work a decrease row and then 3 plain rows. If you want to use an odd number or you have no option other than that, a 1 means to work a decrease row every row, so right side and wrong side rows alike. And a 3 means work a decrease row 1 out of every 3 rows. So if you do this multiple times, your decrease rows will change from right side to wrong side rows. It's a little bit more challenging, which is why I suggest sticking to even rows. So I'm going to have 2 different decrease rates. The first one is 1 out of every 2 rows, and the other is 1 out of every 4 rows. You might have a third decrease rate for some reason. That's okay, you can write that here as well. I'm going to start with the bigger number, so the slower decrease rate first. I'm going to repeat it 4 times, but decrease every 4th 4 times. And then my other one is every 2nd 4 times. So keep that handy for later on. We're going to apply everything that we've done so far to our actual pattern. So for the body, we're going to cast on our A stitch count, which we found was 29 stitches for us. And then you're going to work in garter for your desired edging length and end with a finished wrong side row. So for us, that was 0.75 inches of hem. Row 1, which is a right side row, we're going to knit across. And then row 2, we're going to knit 3, purl to the last 3 stitches, and knit 3. So we're creating a garter edging, So we're going to work rows 1 and 2 for C, amount of rows. So if we remember on page 2, C is 22 rows. So we repeat rows 1 and 2 for 22 rows, which would be 11 times because it's a 2-row repeat. So 22 divided by 2 is 11 times. So we're ready to start knitting. So for me, I need to cast on 29 stitches. So I'm just going to do a long tail cast on. You can do whatever cast on you prefer. Our hem or our edging is going to be done in garter. So whatever you think looks best for that. All right, so here I have 29 stitches. Unless you're knitting a top for a doll, you're going to have way more stitches than I have here. But this is just for an example. So I'm going to work in garter until my desired edging length, which for me is 3/4 of an inch. A long tail cast on puts me on a wrong side row. So I'm just going to knit across. And that's it. You just work a few rows in garter until you get to your desired edging length. Go ahead and do that, and I will meet you back here for the body section. You want to end with a finished wrong side row, so your next row, this one right here, will be a right side row. At this stage, we're going to work our body. So this is our C section, which we've written down. You're just going to knit across every right side row. And at the end, we turn our work, bring our yarn around to the back, and for a wrong side row, we're going to knit 3, just as normal. And then you're going to purl until you have only 3 stitches left on your row. And then I stop 3 stitches from the end and switch to knitting and knit the final 3 stitches. If you find it helpful, you can place a marker after the first 3 stitches of the row and before the last 3 so that you kind of separate that edging if you think that will help you, especially on purling rows. But that's your stitch pattern. It's very simple. So go ahead and work those 2 rows until you've knit the total amount of rows that you need. So for me, I'm going to repeat it until I've done 22 rows. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here for the decrease section. So now that I have done my entire plain section, it is time to work our decrease section. We want to start with the slower decrease rate, which is the larger number. So for me, it was to decrease 1 row out of every 4. And then after I'm done with all of those, I will move into decreasing once out of every 2 rows. You're going to continue working in this established pattern that we've done here while decreasing. So you're going to work the edging always as normal, and then you will decrease just after or just before the garter edging on your project. So these are the example decrease rows in either right side or wrong side versions. So I'll show you one of those. So my first rate, as I said, was once every 4 rows. I find it easiest to decrease on the right side if I have an option. If it says to decrease every row, you'll have to work, a decrease on your right side and a wrong side. But if you can, try and decrease on the right side. So we're going to knit 3. And now we're going to work an SSK. So slip the first stitch as if to knit, slip the second as if to purl, go into the front loops of both of these stitches at the same time, yarn over, pull a loop through, and slide off. And now you're just going to knit until you have only 5 stitches left. For the last 5 stitches, I'm going to work a knit 2 together. So we're going to go into the next 2 stitches at the same time. The same way you'd go into one, you go into both. Should look like that. Yarn over, pull a loop through and slide off, and then tighten up a little bit to retension it, and knit the last 3 stitches. And there you have it. That is how you decrease on a right side row. Because my decrease rate is out of 4 rows, I've worked 1 and now I must work 3 more. And then I will repeat that 3 more times. So I've worked 4 total at that decrease rate. And then I will work every second. So I'll work a decrease row on the right side, work a plain row on the wrong side, and I will work that a total of 4 times. And at the end, I should have 13 stitches, which was my B number of stitches. Go ahead and do that. And I will meet you back here for the hem. I'll quickly walk you through the wrong side decrease row. So you're going to work a knit 3, purl 2 together, purl the last 5 stitches, and then purl 2 together through the back loop, knit 3. So knit 3. Bring your yarn around to the front, and then we're going to purl 2 together. So go into the next 2 stitches at the same time from right to left. Yarn over, pull through, slide off. And then you just purl to the last 5 stitches. Once you get down to the last 5 stitches, we're going to purl 2 together through the back loop. So we need to pick up the next 2 stitches, but the back loops of them from left to right. I have a more in-depth tutorial on how to do this, but just quickly, I just section these 2 off with my fingers, and then I'm going to go around the back and pick up, starting with the second from the edge and then the first from the edge. I pick up just the back loops like this, and then I yarn over from front to back, pull a loop through and slide that off my needle, and then I knit the last 3 stitches. So now that you know how to work a decrease row, go ahead and work your entire decrease section, and I will meet you back here for the top hem. I've finished my decrease section. Yours will not look as disproportionate as mine. I ended up with 13 stitches, as I should, and now it's time to finish the top. Rows 1, 2, and 3, we're going to knit across, and then row 4, we're going to bind off. So go ahead and work 3 garter rows. Now I'm going to knit 3, bind off until I have only 3 stitches left, and knit those last 3. So knit 3 to begin with. And then I'm just going to do a standard knit bind off. So knit 2 more. Pull the second one over the first and off. Knit 1. Bind off 1. Knit 1. Bind off 1 until I have only 3 stitches left in total. You'll have 2 on your left hand needle and 1 on your right hand needle if you do this bind off method. So knit the last few. And now you should have a bind off in between your 2 straps. So go ahead and turn your work. So now your yarn is attached to your left strap here, and it's your left strap because when you're wearing it, it will be worn like this, and this will be your left strap. When we're laying it down with our right side, it looks like it's on the right, but this will really be your left strap. What I think is easiest is just to place the other 3 stitches on hold. So I just take a stitch marker, but you could use waste yarn as well. Slide them off my needle and slide them onto a stitch marker, and they're good to go. So now slide back to the beginning. So now we're going to knit our first I-cord strap. When you knit an I-cord, you never turn your work. Our yarn is attached here to our first stitch. I'm going to knit 3. And now I'm not going to turn my work. Instead, I'm going to hold it and pull on my needle until the other needle comes out the other side. And again, we never turned our work. So our yarn is attached to our 3rd stitch here. That's what we want. And now you just knit those 3 stitches again. And you can kind of pull up to straighten it out if you need. And you just repeat that. So you just always pull the needle so that you come to the other needle instead of turning your work. And that's it. You just knit your I-cord this way. So you need to knit until your strap is as long as you want it to be in order to tie it in the back. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here for the I-cord bind off. So when you've knit your I-cord as long as you want it to be, and you've slid down to the beginning again, like to start a new row, we're going to do a standard bind off. So knit 2, pull the second one over the first one and off, knit 1 more, pull the second one over the first and off, cut your yarn, leaving a tail, pull through, and obviously your strap will be much, much longer, but you'll have your I-cord strap, which looks nice and neat. You can place the 3 stitches that were on hold back onto your needle. And I want to slide the needle until the tip is facing my right side. And then I wrap my yarn just to get tension around a finger on my right hand, because I'm a continental knitter, but if you're an English knitter, you could wrap it around a finger on your left hand if that's easier. So now with the right side facing, I'm going to knit 3. And pull on my needle and slide down to the other side. And you're just going to repeat the I-cord process. So with my yarn attached to the 3rd stitch from the end, I'm going to knit 3. You'll have to tug on your tail yarn to kind of even things out. But yeah, you just repeat the same process for the same amount of rows as your other front strap until your I-cord is as long as you want it to be, and then you bind off in the same way. So go ahead and do that until your straps match, and I will meet you back here for knitting your side straps. Now that we have both of our neck straps done, it's time to do our back straps. So we're going to pick up stitches on the right side here and on the left side here. 3 stitches here and 3 stitches here in order to create your back straps. And we're going to do that individually and work I-cords out. So you always want to pick up stitches with the right side of your work facing you. We're going to measure approximately 3 inches up from your edge, which is about here for me. Doesn't have to be exact, you just kind of want them to be in the same spot on both sides. And first we're going to tension some yarn, so the same way we did it earlier. I'm going to wrap it just 3 times around my right hand. So with the right side facing, I'm just going to kind of find an edge stitch. My 3-inch mark hits about this purl ridge here, so I'm going to go into the hole of a stitch at the edge. So I just kind of go through 1 stitch at the edge here, and then I'm going to yarn over, pull that through, and there we have our first picked up stitch. So then I go up to the next hole, which is this one right here, go into that stitch, yarn over, pull that loop through, and then we do the same thing. We go up 1 more stitch, find that hole, put your needle from front to back, yarn over, pull that loop through. Again, you can use a crochet hook if you find that to be easier. And there you have it. Those are your 3 picked up stitches. So now I can release my tail yarn, and we're going to do the same thing we did for the neck straps. We're going to pull on our needle until we get to the other end. Now our yarn is attached to the 3rd stitch here, and now we're going to knit 3. Might have to pull on the tail yarn to close up any gap there, but that's it. You just slide your needle back to the other end, and you keep working that until you have an I-cord, as long as you want it to be in order to tie in the back. And then you just bind off in the same way that you bound off your neck straps. So that's how you do one of the back straps. You can either measure 3 inches on the other side here, or you can just count the rows up from here and do the same thing on the other side. So this is the same row on the other side. With the strap on the right half, we went bottom to top to pick up, but on the left half, we're going to go top to bottom when picking it up. You want to kind of turn your work, tension your yarn like we've been doing. Now this one starts at this purl ridge here and goes and picks up 3 stitches up this way. So in order to match it on this side, I'm going to start 2 stitches above where my marker is. It doesn't have to be exact. You're trying to just get them to kind of match up and look similar. Again, this is my cast on edge down here. This stitch right here would be the stitch I would start with. This is where my marker is, so I'm going to go 2 stitches above it. So I just go 2 above it, find where that stitch is, go from the right side to the wrong side, yarn over, and pull that loop through so you can slide down to the end and pull that stitch over so the yarn over comes through. Move 1 stitch down. So this next hole right here from front to back, yarn over, pull a loop through, move 1 stitch down, should be right here, yarn over, pull a loop through. And there we have it. I can release my tail. And as we have been doing, I'm going to slide down to the other end of my needle and knit 3. And then pull on your needle. So you just knit as many rows as you did for the other side, and then you bind off. And at the end, you will have a fully finished crop top. So this is what my actual sample looks like. And this is one of my side ties. And that is how you make a hand knit halter top. I hope you guys found this video enjoyable. And if you made one, let me know in the comments. And if you want to see anything in particular, you can tell me that in the comments as well. But I hope you found this video helpful and easy to follow. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.